Hey everyone, so I am back in my normal training spot. Thanks for bearing with me over the last few weeks. I was a little bit wild and I'm trying to get back in the swing of things. But today we are going to be talking about working with other photographers and kind of a whole in-depth guide on working with other photographers and try to answer the most frequently asked questions about this topic. So this is a repeated training I've done before. So if you've already watched it, I try to include way more information to make it more interesting and everything like that for you. So it's not the same old information and it can maybe help you a little bit or help refresh you or anything like that. So before we get started, there's a few definitions that you need to understand. Because I kind of mentioned them throughout the training. Hopefully, I think I mentioned all of these things. So yeah, the first one is freelancer. So a freelancer is someone who works for themselves, at least in the modeling industry or photography industry. It's someone who works for themselves. They don't work for an agency or they don't work for a company. So they choose the jobs that they want. A model call or an open call. The words are kind of used interchangeably a little bit. They mean semi the same thing, and I'll get more into depth in a later slide, but it's basically an open casting for talent in a specific job, shoot, or gig. So a casting or a call, a posting for a model or some kind of talent for a specific look, for a specific job, a specific photo shoot, or a specific gig. Trade for print or TFP means basically a collaboration between models and photographers. It's also referred to as a test shoot or a collab. It's kind of an older term that we still use for whatever reason. It used to mean actually trading for print images. So a model would set up a trade for print with a photographer to trade, their time and modeling skills for print for their portfolios. But a lot of times we call it test shoot or collab. Test shoot is really something that we set up, that agents set up. So you'll hear it a lot in agencies, but you can use any of those words interchangeably and photographers will know what you're talking about. Next is booking rate. This just means like a certain fee per hour that a photographer or model charges. And some other terms that you guys should already know, but I wanted to just remind you. Photographer, you guys all know that is someone who takes pictures for a living or for, passion or hobby. A model who is who takes pictures, who's in pictures for a living or a hobby, or who models clothing or things like that, A stylist is someone who styles models or celebrities or people, whether that be in everyday fashion or for photo shoots. They take care of wardrobe, which comes to our next term, which is wardrobe. That's just clothing for, in the modeling industry, a photo shoot or runway or something like that. Hair and makeup is artists who, style hair and do makeup for photo shoots in this case. A vendor is another type of collaborator. So if you think of a wedding, if you were to do like a bridal test shoot or something like that, a vendor that might also be in it is like a florist. And last but not least is submission. And that is just referring to possibly submitting to a magazine or some kind of publication of some sort. So before we get started messaging photographers or working with new photographers, mostly messaging, I would say, there's a few things you should do. I have one slide for Instagram and one slide for email because that's usually the two ways we talk to photographers. So on Instagram, you want to make sure that your bio mentions that you model. I talked a little bit about this, I think, in the last training or the one before, that your bio should mention that you model, so that photographers know what you're interested in doing. Make sure that your agency is tagged. If you're part of Schwartz Models, that is a contract requirement. So make sure that Schwartz Models is in your bio so the photographer can look at possibly your portfolio or kind of what you are working towards. mention somewhere in your bio or somewhere on Instagram where you are located. Now, obviously be safe about this. Never share your actual location online. But you can put maybe your state or the closest big city that you live next to, or your county or something like that. Something that doesn't give away your precise location, but something where photographers can see that you are based in this area. Make sure that if you are modeling, you are posting modeling pictures. This is probably pretty obvious. If you don't have a lot of modeling pictures, that's okay. Just keep posting your normal pictures. Make sure that if you are modeling, that you are displaying those on your Instagram. And make sure to follow photographers, follow each other, or have a public profile if you're of age and able to be safe while doing so. The reason I say this is because a lot of times, especially if you respond to an open call or something like that, and your profile is private, they probably are just going to skip you and go to the next candidate. It's something that kind of sucks. So make sure that people who want to collaborate with you can access your social media and see maybe your portfolio or page or get into contact with you. Next up is email. So before you get started, what you should do email wise, make sure that you have a professional email that you have access to. We don't want to see, Justin Bieber's biggest fan, 81321@gmail.com. Make sure that it's something semi-professional. I recommend listing your name. So you don't have to, obviously, again, be safe. Don't use your full name or anything like that. But make sure that your name is stated somewhere on your email or in your email or something like that, so they know who they're talking to. Make sure you add your contact information and link any pages like your social media, a portfolio page, your agency page, anything like that. I do this actually in the signature of my email. So that's something that you can set up in the settings of your email. I highly, highly recommend it. I created one that has in my signature all my links and everything like that. So I highly recommend that. You never have to worry about putting that information because it's always there and people always know how to reach you. And make sure that your alerts are on. If you don't use email a lot and you plan on emailing photographers, make sure that you don't ghost them by accident by forgetting that you emailed them and didn't go on Instagram. Okay, let's talk about a few ways to work with photographers. So there's a few different ways you can go about this, and these are in no particular order. One way is to apply for an open call like we talked about, whether that is online, on a modeling forum, or a casting page, or a casting forum, or anything like that, an online job, or whether that's on Instagram, a website, something like that. You could email a photographer. You can message a photographer on Instagram. Now, the difference between those, there's pros and cons to both. Emailing a photographer is a great way to directly contact them, where DMing a photographer might get just lost because personally, coming as a photographer, my DMs are constantly flooded and I have a hard time keeping up and keeping track of them. Versus email, we can sort the emails and, they usually go straight to our phone. I personally don't have my alerts on Instagram. And I know a lot of other photographers don't because we're getting a lot of engagement on there versus email is like basically texting me. So while messaging a photographer on Instagram is also great because it shows your portfolio right there and you can see their portfolio right there. So one of those is great. You can ask your agent to set up a test shoot for you, which includes me as your agent. You can ask me to set up a test shoot for you, or you can pay a photographer's booking fee and book with a photographer of your choice. And we're going to talk about all of those ways today, but that's just kind of the overview. Let's see. Before we start messaging photographers, we need to understand them a little bit better. So I'm going to step out of my agent role right now and step into my photographer role and just talk a little bit more about photography and photographers' careers in general so that you can better understand them. Because I think the key to working great together is to understand each other really well, so we can have respect and both get what we want out of it. So number one, let's talk about what a hobby model is versus like a full-time or freelance model versus, or sorry, freelance photographer versus full-time photographer. Someone who does photography full-time typically relies on that income to pay their bills. Okay. So full-time photographers typically have less availability to do free shoots or shoots with freelance models. So freelancing goes both ways in photography and modeling. If someone is relying on jobs to pay their bills and they're currently making enough to pay those bills, they might not have a lot of availability to do free shoots because booking a free shoot is taking away a shoot that could be potentially paid for by someone else. So we want to make sure that if you're working with a full-time photographer, that you understand what they need and how you guys can best collaborate versus a freelance photographer or a hobby photographer might have more availability and more interest in doing free shoots to help their portfolio, while full-time photographers probably don't need to build their portfolio as much because they're already making their goals. They're already doing that, while freelance or hobby photographers might have more time and more availability to do something for free because it's not necessarily taking a booking away from them, if that makes sense. So remember to, try to take a step back and look at it from the photographer's point of view. If this is their full-time job, that they are doing free work, and it might be taking away from paid work as well. So there is a give and take there. Also, something I want to mention, right kind of in here, is how expensive photography can be. Photography is a very, very expensive hobby and very expensive job. Just between my bills, and I know a lot of people don't understand the bills that come with photography and the upkeep, but we have extremely expensive equipment. We have expensive studio spaces, computers, software, anything like that. So just between my bills, like my softwares and everything like that, and then my studio space, my insurance, my what's it called? My subscription for my galleries. I have another one. I can't remember what it is. But just between all of those, kind of my utilities and bills, I pay probably around $500 or more a month just to upkeep my business. And that doesn't include any of my equipment. So every time I need a new hard drive, every time I need a new memory card, every time I need printer stuff, every time I need a new lens for my camera or a battery or anything like that, it's extremely, extremely expensive. Camera bodies can be anywhere from $500 to $5,000, and lenses can be anywhere around the same price. So just remember that it's an extremely expensive hobby, and it's very expensive to keep up. So that's why a lot of times you'll see photography packages being so expensive, because just to pay for my bills, I need to book at least a few shoots a month that are a couple $100. And then to make a profit is even more. So just remember that modeling can be something free that you do because it doesn't technically take anything to upkeep or maintain. While you do need to physically maintain yourself or buy makeup or buy wardrobe or get yourself to and from shoots, photographers also have to do that, pay for gas, anything like that. So just remember that photographers are paying a lot more money to do basically the same industry as modeling, or be in the same industry as modeling. So let's talk about packages and the expenses surrounding packages. Typical photography packages range from anywhere from, I would say, $150 to $500. Just depending on the photographer and the package, their experience, what they offer, etc. Now, some photographers offer discounted rates for models, and it will be anywhere from $75, $50, something like that, to about $300. Now, you can expect to get anywhere from 3 to 30 photos or more, depending on the package. And it just depends on the photographer. This is because editing and retouching is extremely lengthy and it's very, very time consuming. So for example, I edit a lot differently than most photographers. A typical album, I over edit and I over deliver. So most photographers deliver, up to about 30 photos. I deliver anywhere from 100 to 400 photos and sometimes more. I do basic retouching on those albums and color correction, if that makes sense. So versus like a magazine retouching, if I do a magazine submission, I spend a lot more time retouching the skin and everything like that. Where typical sessions, I'll usually leave beauty marks, or maybe if you have one pimple or something like that, I'll leave it because it saves time, okay? Unless someone were to ask me to remove something. Versus like a magazine, I might spend 6 hours just editing one photo and retouching the skin. So a lot of photographers will spend that much time, and that's why they only give a few photos. Let's talk about career goals. Some photographers want to just make money and work with families, work with seniors, work with weddings and couples, versus, fashion photographers or artistic photographers. So make sure you're paying attention to, what that photographer kind of talks about and posts about and books, for the most part, what their portfolio suggests, everything like that, because not all of them really necessarily want to go into fashion, or, in the modeling industry with editorial work or artistic work, things like that. Not every photographer works with models. Some photographers only work with families and couples and seniors and weddings, things like that. And then some photographers only work with models. And then there's people who work with both, like me. Getting paid versus paying out. I'm going to talk about this from the model perspective later, but let's talk about it from the photographer's perspective. Photographers like to get paid for every shoot that they do, because it costs them money to do every shoot that they do. It costs me money to shoot with all of the models I'm signed with. Even when I'm not making money, it costs me money because I have softwares that require subscriptions and things like that, as well as my equipment costing money. So photographers like to get paid, okay? Now, the only time that photographers typically pay models is when they are looking for a specific look and they want a model in specific, or they're getting paid by a client, and then they pay the model a portion of that paycheck, if that makes sense. If you are local to Cortez or the surrounding areas, here's some recommended photographers in our area. I also have 2 photographers that we do not recommend. And if you would like to set up some test shoots or look into photographers in your area and you're not in Cortez, please let me know and I can help with that. But if you're in Cortez, the ones are Sue, her name on Instagram, Sue Shutterbug, Ray, his name on Instagram is Our Captain. Harley, she is newer to the area, but she's from Durango, or she lives in Durango. She is OCK, I think it's OCK videographer, or maybe it's OKC videographer on Instagram. And then Evie from Evie Joy Feltz. She doesn't work with models too much, but she has kind of dipped her toe in it. So it's worth, reaching out. Her work is awesome. Or if you want to try a bridal shoot, that's probably down her alley. But for sure, Sue, Ray, and Harley all have worked with models. They might ask for a booking fee. It just kind of depends on the situation. But those are some photographers we recommend. And photographers we do not recommend in this area are Walt from Macaulay Imagery, because of the several bad experiences that signed models have had. And if you do work with this photographer, that's fine. You won't have your contract ended or anything, but we will not display the photos in your portfolio because it has proved to be a dangerous situation. Another photographer that we do not recommend or support is Noe. It kind of looks like it's spelled no. Noe Lozano. He did move away, so he's not really local, but I thought I would mention it because he does come to the area. We've had several bad experiences with him as well that have proved to just be, I wouldn't necessarily say dangerous, but definitely uncomfortable. So, okay, let's talk about working with an agent. What are the pros and cons of that and how you can do that? So if you were to work with an agent, including myself, agents can set up test shoots or trade for prints with photographers. It's usually a great way to get around any booking fees so you guys can mutually collaborate. A lot of the time when you go through an agent, you might not be able to choose that theme, like the model might not be able to choose that theme, but the agent will make sure that it's good for your portfolio. And you can obviously always say yes or no. It's also a great way to have opportunity for other vendors to participate. Other vendors being makeup artists, hairstylists, florists, stylists, anyone like that, because those kind of vendors want to get in on group shoots like that. It's really great for their portfolio, our portfolio, everyone's portfolio. Everyone's wins in these scenarios. So that is a big pro to working with an agent or going through an agent. And it's also something that's great for your portfolio, of course. Okay, some things to consider before working with a photographer. Let's talk about traveling. How far are you willing to travel for a shoot with a photographer? That's something that you should think of before you work with a photographer or reach out to a photographer. I like to set up a radius personally. Just go on maps and see how far you'd be willing to travel for a shoot, or how far you'd travel to meet up with a photographer. All these things are really important, especially if you plan on messaging a photographer who's not in your area. Another thing to consider is legal protection. Have you read over any contracts or agreements that the photographer might have for you? And do you need help with that? You can send them to your agent or me if I'm your agent. One second. My computer is about to die. Let me grab my charger. Whew. That was close. Okay. It just popped up saying I had 15 minutes, and then within 30 seconds it said I only had 1 minute. That scared me. Okay. I'm recording this on the site I use to make these presentations, so I can't pause it or anything. I can't edit it. So kind of just have to go with the flow. Anyways, have you read over these agreements? Have you agreed to them? Are you comfortable with them? Or if there's no contract, have you thought about making your own to have legal protection to protect yourself and protect your images? Anything like that. It's a really great thing to think about or start thinking about. And if you need help with that, let me know and I can try to help you or answer any questions you have about contracts. Because photographers will ask you to sign contracts. Buddy system. Buddy system is something that I'm super, passionate about. Do you have someone reliable that you can count on to come to your shoot, to have your back, to help keep you safe, to back you up in situations, to protect your boundaries, etc. I highly recommend and ask every single one of you that if you are meeting with a new photographer, that you bring a buddy system. There are predators in the industry, and there is a power dynamic between a photographer and model, considering that the photographer brings home the images, edits them, and is the one to send them to the model. So make sure that you have someone to back you up and to know where you are and everything like that. Something that I hear a lot about with bad feelings or bad experiences with photographers is that they had a bad gut feeling that something was going to happen. So make sure that if you have a gut feeling and you don't feel good about something, that you react to that and respond to that. Your career isn't going to be over because you don't shoot with a photographer. There are predators in the industry, like I said. And if you have a bad feeling about a photographer, listen to it. Okay. Listen to it. Make sure to share your experience, whether it's good or bad, with your agent and fellow models, because this will really help, other photographers, and it will help you. It will help your agency get to know these people better, because a lot of times I'm not working with other photographers. You guys are. So make sure to share your experience on that. Okay, let's talk about actually reaching out. There's a few things that I've laid out to make reaching out the best possible outcome. Okay, first off, you need to do some research. Does the photographer look like they collaborate with models? If they don't, you can still ask them, but typically if they don't, they will probably just send you their booking rates. Now, photographers who do work with models might send you their booking rates too, but typically it's most common for photographers who don't work with models to charge probably 100% of the time. Do you like their editing and shooting style? This is really important for your portfolio. Make sure that their shooting style and editing style is something that you would like to feature in your portfolio and on your Instagram. What kind of things do they like to shoot? What kind of things are they always posting about, or things like that? It's also a great time to look at their website if they have one in their portfolio, because you will see the types of themes that they like to shoot based on what they portray in their portfolio. A lot of photographers post almost everything that they shoot, versus on their portfolio, they're displaying things that they really like to shoot. So you want to check that out too and make sure it aligns with what you want to do. Would you feel comfortable shooting with them? Obviously, this is a question you probably can't answer right away, but you can ask previous models from that they've worked with in the past and in the present for their experience to get a better understanding of them as a photographer. And also, think about, would you need a buddy, things like that. Then we're going to actually contact them. Use the DM guide that's on the next slide, or make your own. Be respectful and courteous when asking any creative, even a fellow model, of anything. Remember, if you're asking a photographer for free work, you're asking them to spend probably more than you are spending. So make sure that you're being courteous and respectful when asking any creative for any kind of collaboration. I recommend that you have 3 to 4 photo shoot ideas to pitch if they ask you. A lot of times they'll ask if you have something in mind, or they might have something in mind, but I always recommend having a few ideas. That way, if they do ask, you can just put it up right away. And you can use Pinterest for that too. Make sure when you do this, you also brainstorm location, styling, hair and makeup. A lot of times wardrobe and hair and makeup is stuff that photographers don't want anything to do with. So make sure you have a plan for that. Expectations. Make sure that you ask your photographer what is expected of you as a model, and make sure you are clear about your expectations for the photographer. So for example, if you are doing a lingerie shoot and you're not okay with doing any nude shots, make sure you're clear about that with your photographer before, so that way the expectation is already there when you show up, and vice versa. Make sure if you have an expectation of the photographer that you let them know that, and say you need 5 photos and they agree to 5 photos. Make sure you're clear about that, and we've agreed to that. It's in the contract, etc. Comes to our next point. Always sign a contract, even if you make your own or have your own. It's a great way to be legally protected and have all your expectations and boundaries set in stone. And make sure to outline any boundaries or trades before the photo shoot. So that way, when it comes time for the photo shoot, you're not nervous and caught off guard. Everything is laid out the way that it should be, and no one has any questions about what's happening. So let's go over the script I have for you guys. Here's a script that you can use, you can edit, or you can create your own based off of this. I will break it down after I read it. So now would be a great time to screenshot it. and I am going to read it and fill in the blanks, okay? So here we go. Hi there, my name is Amber and I'm a model signed with Schwartz Models based in Cortez. I love your work and was wondering if you collab with models or are up for any test shoots or trade for print. I'm interested in an editorial type of modeling and think we could work well together. I have a few ideas for shoots if you would like to see them, and I would love to hear any ideas you might have as well. Please let me know of any rates you may have if you are not interested in a collab or test shoot. My availability is typically Monday through Friday after 3. If you have any certain requirements to shoot or collab with a model, please let me know. I would also be happy to email if that suits you better. I have attached a few recent images for my last shoot and a digital. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. So there's a few key parts in here that if you decide to make your own script, that you should definitely include. One is going to be your name, that you're model, that you're signed, where you're from, and what kind of modeling you're interested in doing. Mentioning that you might have some ideas or you're open to hearing their ideas. Listing your availability is really great. Mentioning that I like the phrase, please let me know of any rates you may have if you're not interested in a collab or test shoot. This kind of sets the scene or sets the standard of like, hey, if you don't want to collaborate, which means free, let me know your rates and I'll take that into consideration. But it kind of distinguishes and sets a boundary of what you are looking for, if that makes sense. And then lastly, make sure to attach pictures and thank them for their time. Okay. Okay. And now that you guys have read the DM script, I'm going to go to our last slide, which is when do I get paid as a model versus when do I pay a photographer? Now, I'm going to split this up. Sorry, I keep getting texts that are important. Pardon me. Okay. So I'm going to break this up. Now I have a few things I'll explain, those bullet points, but let me explain kind of the general view of who gets paid when in the modeling industry and photography industry. So as a photographer, speaking of myself, this is how I've kind of broke it down. Okay. So if I am looking for a certain look or a certain theme or need someone to fill a certain space, I should pay that person. So if I need help with hair and makeup, if I need a model for a certain thing, I should pay that model. If a person is asking something of specific of me that they need me to do for them, then they should pay me. Now, if we can come together on something that benefits us both, then neither one of us should be paid, or both of us should be paid, which aka none of us would be paid unless we're trading different amounts of money. Typically that would be a collab or a trade. I've never done something where we mutually collaborated and both of us got paid. And the other time I would pay someone out is if I'm getting paid and that I need someone else to join me to create something that I would be paid for. So if a company is paying me to do something, photography work, and I need a model for it, then I would pay up that model as well because I'm getting paid. So, and then it, goes in reverse for models. So you can kind of think of it like that to decide when and who should get paid. Now, a lot of times for me, I don't have the luxury of paying models for certain things for my portfolio, considering I am contracted with over 10 models that I provide free shoots to on a monthly basis. So I'm already doing a lot of free work and it actually costs me money to do that. So I don't have the budget to pay models. So the times when I do something for my portfolio, I hold an open call. So open call is, for me, it's an unpaid gig. because I'm not getting paid for it and other people aren't getting paid for it. It's for my portfolio. They're welcome to use it for their portfolio as well. But the models have that discretion of, whether they want to do it or not. So I'm not asking someone in particular to do something for me. It's kind of volunteered. So let's talk about the kind of different scenarios that this runs into. Collaborations, trade for print, and test shoots. Those typically are all unpaid on both parties, okay? When there's a booking rate asked for, whoever is inquiring is going to be the person paying, okay? Now, if you're inquiring about a photographer's booking rate, then you're going to pay that. If the photographer's inquiring about your booking rate, you're going to pay that. Open calls and casting calls, typically, there's no law on these things, okay? But typically, from my personal experience, open calls are typically unpaid, while casting calls are typically paid. But I have seen some instances where it's one or the other, or they go vice versa, right? Gigs are typically paid as well, but there are unpaid gigs. But typically when they use that wording, it's paid. And then we talk about how to decide for yourself who should get paid. Ultimately, it's up to you. If you do not want to ever do any work that's unpaid, that is completely up to you. If you want to pay a photographer, do you guys hear that? Like, it's my iPad, I guess. My phone is just going insane. Okay. It's ultimately up to you. There's models who pay for every single shoot that they do because they're paying a photographer to work with them. And there's models who only work when they're paid. And then there's people who do only test shoots, only collabs. So no one's getting paid. And some people mix it up, right? So it's ultimately up to you. I would recommend that you kind of go, that you try to think of it in the way that I described. If you're asking someone to do something in specific that you need, you should pay. And if someone's asking you something in specific that they need, they should pay you. And if you guys can come together, then it's, a mutual collaboration. No one pays. That's kind of how most of the people in the industry look at it. And that's how I recommend you guys look at it too. So that is it for today's training on how to work with photographers. Use that DM script or talk to me, talk to your agent about setting up a test shoot. And I will talk to you guys next week. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or need more information about working with a photographer, please let me know. And I will talk to you guys next week. Have a good one. Bye.